There's a specific kind of adult that's very hard to spot from the outside. They're responsible, reliable, the one people call when things fall apart. They're good in a crisis, calm under pressure, and somehow always know what everyone around them needs before anyone has to ask. And if you looked at their childhood, you might even say they had it together back then too. Mature for their age, an old soul, so easy, never any trouble. But here's what nobody saw. There was a child in there who was never really allowed to just be a child, who learned very early that the adults around them needed something: stability, emotional support, peace, performance, and that it was somehow their job to provide it, who grew up carrying weight that was never theirs to carry, who got so good at taking care of everything around them that nobody ever stopped to take care of them. If that child sounds familiar, stay with me, because today we're getting into the psychology of the child who is never allowed to be a child, and what that does to the adult they become. Here's where it starts. Childhood is supposed to be the one time in your life when your needs come first. Not because children are selfish, but because development actually requires it. A child needs to play without purpose, to cry without being told to stop, to need things without apologizing for needing them, to make mistakes without the weight of consequences that belong to adults. That freedom, that protected, unhurried space, is not a luxury. It is how a healthy nervous system gets built. But some children never get that space. Instead, they grow up in environments where something else is always more urgent than their childhood. Maybe there's a parent struggling with mental health, addiction, or illness, and the child learns to monitor, manage, and walk on eggshells. Maybe the family is in financial crisis, and the child absorbs the anxiety like it's theirs to solve. Maybe one parent is absent, and the other leans on the child for emotional support that should never come from a child. Maybe the message is simply, be good, be quiet, don't be a burden. And so they aren't. Psychologists have a term for this. It's called parentification. And researcher Dr. Gregory Jurkovic, who has studied this extensively, defines it as the process by which a child is placed in the role of caretaker, emotional or practical, for the adults in their family. It's not always dramatic. It doesn't require abuse or crisis. Sometimes it's as quiet as a parent who sighs heavily and the child spends the rest of the evening trying to fix the mood. Sometimes it's being the one who keeps the peace, reads the room, holds everyone together without anyone asking, because someone has to, and you learned young that the someone was you. And here's what the research shows about what that does to a developing brain. Dr. Bruce Perry, a leading neuroscientist and childhood trauma expert, has shown that chronic stress in childhood, including the stress of over-responsibility, activates the body's threat response system repeatedly and persistently. When a child is constantly attuned to the emotional environment around them, scanning for danger, managing adult emotions, their nervous system never gets the signal that it's safe to simply rest. And a nervous system that never learns to rest doesn't suddenly know how to once the child grows up. It just keeps scanning, keeps managing, keeps bracing for what comes next. This is why so many adults who grew up this way cannot relax without guilt, cannot sit still without feeling like they should be doing something, cannot receive care without feeling deeply uncomfortable, because being cared for was never part of the script they were handed. There's something else that happens in these childhoods that goes even deeper, and this one matters enormously. When a child has to suppress their own needs to manage the emotional environment around them, they don't just learn to put themselves last. They learn that their inner world, their feelings, their wants, their exhaustion, their fear, is not safe to express, that it takes up too much space, that the adults around them cannot hold it. And so, they tuck it away. They get very good at presenting a version of themselves that is fine, capable, together, while underneath there is a child who never got to be seen. Dr. Donald Winnicott, the influential British psychologist, described this as the development of a false self, a constructed, adaptive version of a person built to meet the needs of their environment, while the true self stays hidden and protected. For children who are never allowed to simply be children, that false self gets built very early and very solidly. And by the time they're adults, they've often been performing it for so long that they've lost access to what's underneath. They don't know what they want. They don't know what rest feels like. They don't know who they are when nobody needs anything from them. And the adulthood that follows carries all of this quietly forward. It looks like someone who is endlessly capable but privately exhausted, who gives generously but struggles to receive, who takes responsibility for everything, including things that have nothing to do with them, because somewhere deep in their nervous system, responsibility feels like safety. Like if they stay useful, stay needed, stay one step ahead of everyone else's needs, nothing will fall apart. It looks like difficulty with boundaries, not because they don't understand the concept, but because saying no activates something ancient and frightening in them. A fear that without their usefulness, they are not enough to be loved. It looks like relationships where they consistently overfunction, where they are the one who holds everything together, plans everything, anticipates everything, and quietly wonders why nobody does the same for them. Not because the people around them are unkind, but because they never learned how to ask. Asking felt unsafe once, and the body doesn't forget. Research by Dr. Judith Herman on complex trauma shows that children who grow up in chronically stressful relational environments, where their emotional needs are consistently unmet or reversed, often develop what she calls a disrupted sense of self. They struggle to identify their own feelings, trust their own perceptions, and believe that their needs are valid. Not because something is wrong with them, but because the environment they grew up in never reflected their inner world back to them with care. And perhaps the most painful part of all of this, the part that doesn't get said enough, is the grief. Because at some point, usually in adulthood, sometimes slowly and sometimes all at once, it lands. The childhood that didn't happen, the games that weren't played, the carefreeness that was never available, the parents who needed parenting, the child who needed someone to show up for them and spent years showing up for everyone else instead. That grief is real, it is valid, and it is one of the heaviest things a person can carry, partly because the world doesn't always have a name for it. You didn't lose a parent to death. You didn't survive something the world would recognize as a disaster. You just lost something quieter and harder to explain, your own childhood. But here is what's also true, and this part matters just as much. The same qualities that were forged in that difficult childhood, the attunement, the resilience, the capacity to hold space for others, the deep emotional intelligence, those are real. They are yours. They were not wasted. They just came at a cost that was too high for a child to pay, and that cost deserves to be acknowledged. Healing for the adult who never got to be a child doesn't mean going back. It means slowly, carefully, giving yourself some of what was missing. Permission to rest without earning it. Permission to need things without apologizing. Permission to not be the one who holds everything together all the time. Permission to let someone else show up for you, and to stay still long enough to let them. It means learning, maybe for the first time, that you are allowed to take up space. Not because of what you do for people, not because of how useful or capable or together you are, but simply because you exist. And that was always enough. You just weren't told. The child who never got to be a child grew into an adult who is still waiting, somewhere inside, for someone to say, "Put it down. Rest. You've done enough. It's okay now." So consider this that moment. You've done enough. It's okay now. If this reached a part of you that's been waiting a long time to hear it, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.